Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen and dear colleagues. Indeed, there was a lot to take in and there was a lot to reflect on. The EU Agri-Food Days have become the annual event to exchange on ideas, on priorities, and there are many priorities and objectives that we have to tackle. Thank you very much for the active participation throughout this first day, because it was only the first of 2.5 days. We had something like 650 people here and more than 1,000 online representing all ways of life. Sasha, you polled in the beginning who is in the room. Because really what matters is to bring together this whole value chain of the European agri-food system. And this diversity is what helps us to look the challenges and opportunities from multiple angles. It isn't simple. There are many points of view that we have to take into account. But one thing that was fairly clear is that we want to focus on competitive, sustainable, resilient agri-food sectors in Europe, and for that we need generational renewal, simple rules, strong finance, including access to private finance, but then also the markets that matter. And it was emphasized more than once, the power of the markets, the incentives that consumers have to also bring about transition. One other theme that came back throughout today's discussion is the importance of the dialogue and to have workable solutions. And when I say workable solutions, is a solution that works for the farmers in their diversity, in their regional, in their setting, in taking into account their conditions. And I think this is really what matters for us when we discuss policy, especially now that we turn to the new framework, the policy for the period after 2028, that we have rules that can work on the ground with the farm needs at the center, applied consistently, and to really for that understand the needs. So this is the purpose of the event. We had several key themes debated in the different sessions. As you will remember, and I'll try just a very brief summary, it all started with food security and the discussion about food security, which remains a central pillar really for our policy and the common agricultural policy's role in there. This has several links, and it was all about income, of course, for farmers, but also how we attract and retain farmers, the role that subsidies and financial incentives play in a market-oriented policy that we have in the EU, and then how we can encourage young but also female farmers to join the sector so that we have a more inclusive sector, because that's what makes the strength of it. In that session, the opening session, the VIP session, we also had the predictability and the fairness that was highlighted several times for a policy environment that sets the context for long-term decision-making, because it's not about 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. This has an even longer perspective when you invest in a certain farm model or business model, or when you invest in a transition. And in that context, we had different, again, factors that shaped this. There was the volatility in the markets, the rising costs, but also the increasing exposure to climate-related risks mentioned, for example, but not only by the Cypriot minister when she talked about the drought, and then later on also by Hannah when she said there is not enough rain for some of the crops. So resilience and adaptation was another one of these topics that came back. And what I liked very much was also the closing of the first session about when we saw the drawing that was made during the session, and you saw this confidence and pride also that came out as an addition during the discussion. And I think that's very nice to have, because it gives us also the confidence to work together with you on a solid support framework. Equally clear for us was the reference to the new income sources for farmers. So primarily, of course, the products proceeds in the markets, the importance of the subsidies for incentives, certain things that the market will not remunerate, but also as a safety net, and then private funding sources increasingly, and the booming bioeconomy as an opportunity for the farmers. And then we had some discussion also about the clarity and the coherence of the framework that we need. So clarity is on the one hand side simplification, but this is not just about cutting red tape. It's also making good use of the data that we have. So digitalization came across as very central, but also these tasks that are sort of taking away farmers' attention from really running their farms. And then we went into the session on innovation, research, and digital tools, turning this again into practical solutions with a big focus on innovation that delivers when it reaches the farm. So deployment, accessibility, user-friendliness, these contacts, also the knowledge dissemination. And in that context, we advertised our new strategic approach to research and innovation, which we plan for mid-2026, and for which we have herewith also today started the consultation. So please participate in this one. So that session also discussed the other opportunities that we will have in the new budget structure with the Competitiveness Fund, the Research Framework Program as we know it, even more tightly knit together with the Common Agricultural Policy, and then this regional and national planning to really ensure there is the dissemination that we need. So a strong innovation and knowledge system bringing new solutions to practice more quickly, and that also includes, of course, business practices that are covered by our knowledge system. And we had a lot of very nice concrete examples to illustrate this, demonstrating, I think, also the power of cooperation when the science, the technology, and the practice work together. We will also come back to this topic on the third day with a strong focus on digital and innovation, and to see how digital progress can support farmers and also administrations. Then there was a session in the afternoon already on resilience and adaptability, the uncertain environment. Yes, of course, CIP remains central for stability, but also there we saw the need for practical and predictable tools that farmers can rely on when they do risk management instruments, because we were reminded that prevention adaptation is more cost effective than dealing with the damage. And you will remember, perhaps as I do, the European Investment Bank's vice president citing the figure 1 to 6, how cost effective prevention is. But here also the advisory and knowledge networks, and then the timely and transparent information, of course, on what we expect to happen on the markets, including global developments, but also environmental indicators and farm economy indicators for the right decision making. So this also will come back in a future session on the outlook that you will hear later on. Then lastly, but certainly not least, it was about sustainability and the environmental ambition that again must be matched by economic viability and practical solution. And here I think we came back very clearly to this idea that there is a responsibility along the whole value chain, all of them being able to contribute, and there are different pathways for farmers to balance the environmental care with earning a competitive farm income. The role the Common Agricultural Policy can play in setting these incentives that reward the sustainable practices, clearly targeted, clearly available, but also innovation, of course, that supports productivity while reducing pressure on the natural resources. And here too, knowledge sharing and peer-to-peer exchanges. Many interventions, I have to say, really also focused on this multi-actor dialogue. And I found that also echoing very nicely with the idea of the conference in itself. So for competitiveness and supply chain approach, of course, also very important that we have fairness along the value chain, well-functioning value chains, no unfair trading practices, sharing of risks and responsibility, transparency in the relations, and then, of course, the same also holding internationally with high standards that we know in the EU in a level playing field context. So the consumer expectations, I also noted, were mentioned several times as a big driver actually of some of the innovations and transitions. Some of you pointed to structural aspects for the competitiveness. That's the availability of labor, of land, of finance, of course. Private finance, I'll mention it again here, and then the regional context in which all of this is. This, for me, is what stood out in the discussions. Of course, I didn't listen to each and every part that was said in the same attentive way, but I hope all of you will have as many takeaways and as many things to reflect on as we move forward. For me, the clear thing is it's about the effective implementation of our objectives, which require clarity and predictability, and solutions that reflect reality really on the ground. And I think this is what the EU should always strive for in our policies, in our spending, and also, of course, in our regulatory work. So finally, this leads me to just an outlook. So what comes next is on the long-term vision for the markets, which is what will be discussed tomorrow in a more analytical approach to look into the market developments, the consumption and production trends, productivity patterns, environmental and climate pressures, farm income dynamics, and international competitiveness. I think this will be very useful also to situate some of the debates we have had in the broader context. And, of course, to identify where are European strengths, because one thing that was equally clear is that we want to continue to compete internationally and continue to be the export champions. So you don't have to know your pressure points, but you also have to remember your strengths. So let me, on that note, just come back to remind you what really President von der Leyen said at the very, very beginning of this. And I think this is really the scene setter for this week. Farmers are indispensable for Europe's food security, the vitality of our rural areas. That's why we have been here, and that's why we have been debating on this first day. Now, I want to close by just thanking you for building this picture of where we stand today, that our work remains grounded in the practical realities of your comments, of your contributions to this dialogue, because a strong Europe needs a strong agri-food sector. And this is what we will continue to work on, to deliver clarity, coherence, stability, and a forward-looking framework. So to all those who followed online, thank you very much for being with us for the first day, and to those present, the networking continues outside. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And it's just so true. And I think we've seen that all today, that everything that we've been talking about has then had those real life examples from the field grounded in those practical case studies and people who are working and telling us what they are doing to be so resilient and to thrive in their part of the sector. So as Elisabeth says, tomorrow we are looking forward. So tomorrow is the launch of the EU Outlook report. What we're going to do is first thing in the morning, we will lay out the report for you. And then we will take every one of those challenges, those potential headwinds in turn, and go through the day discussing each one of them. And I promise we have got lots of real-life case studies and examples for you tomorrow as well. Lots of opportunities to talk with people here as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, registration, if you are here in the room, starts tomorrow from 8 o'clock. If you are joining us online, everything will start sharply at at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So I do hope you can join us for that. So those in the room, registration from 8. We're starting in the room from 9. We have some time for you to network and to meet more people and to discuss more thoughts outside for you. So may I just thank all our speakers and everyone who has joined us today, and we will see you tomorrow morning to start again from 8 o'clock. Thank you very much. Thank you.